Hi, good morning all, and welcome to NACW. Super excited to start off the conference, and especially excited to start off the conference with this really fantastic workshop. It's a two-part session workshop talking about carbon markets and Mexico. I am just going to do some quick housekeeping before I hand it over to our moderator, Eduardo Piquero. I am Amy Kessler. I am the team lead of our Mexico program at the Climate Action Reserve. And so for the session today, you are welcome and encouraged to ask questions throughout the session. We just ask that you write them into the question and answer functionality. So there's the chat and the question and answer functionality. Please use the Q&A section to ask your questions throughout the session. We'll be monitoring that, and my colleague, Betty Zavaris, will be helping us monitor that throughout the session to respond. And any questions we don't get to, we'll try to follow up. We'll be saving that Q&A and trying to follow up with you as soon as we can. We also hopefully be having a live Q&A session at the end here, in which you'll be able to activate your video and audio to ask your questions vocally if you prefer to do so in that format. All sessions will be recorded, and we'll be sharing that with you after NACW closes. Again, this is a two-part workshop. So this is the first part today, and the second part will be next Tuesday, April 27th. It's 9 p.m. or it's 9 a.m. Pacific time, or 10 to 11 a.m. Mexico time. Today we'll be focusing more on the compliance side. Next week we'll be focusing more on the voluntary side. Great. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Eduardo Piquero, who is the General Director of Mexico ODS.
Thank you very much, Amy, and thank you very much, everyone. I'm Eduardo Piquero, as Amy said, CEO of Mexico CO2. It's a company part of the Mexican Stock Exchange, devoted to develop environmental markets, including carbon, not only in Mexico, but throughout Latin America. Welcome to this workshop on advances and expectations for Mexico's ETS. I'm very glad you guys are here. And well, as you all know, Mexico already has an ETS in place, a pilot ETS, as a matter of fact, since January 2020. Over 60 to 70 companies are covered by this scheme. Perhaps over 300 different points of regulations have already been identified in the country, and CO2 is the only GHG covered so far. The threshold is based in 100,000 tons of CO2 per year, and this pilot phase will end in 2023, starting then a full coverage phase, which we all look forward. We'll discuss throughout this workshop, of course, how this scheme has been developed and the use of offsets very particularly. I'm very glad you guys are here, are also able to discuss how Mexico will move forward with its emissions trading scheme. We have a very, very wonderful, brilliant panel today. We're joined now by Suriel Islas, working for the Climate Change Division in Semarnat, the Ministry of Environment, the Federal Ministry of Environment, by Ivan Hernandez, working for the Partnership for Market Readiness, and also a very well-known actor in the voluntary market in Mexico. This is a long time ago. Mariana Martinez, working for CONAFOR, the National Commission on Forestry, and also a very well-known acquaintance for the voluntary, mostly forestry market in Mexico. Also by Ana Gargollo from Pronatura, climate change coordinator, and also a pioneer in the voluntary market. By Teresa Tattersfield from WRI, also perhaps the person that that knows the most on voluntary forestry carbon, and of course by José Ramón Ardavin, head of CESPEDES, that's the Comisión de Estudios del Sector Privado, the Commission of the Private Sector on Sustainable Development, and of course a outstanding figure on the design of the ETS. So let's begin with the Ministry of Environment. Let's begin with you, Suriel. Perhaps you can comment on the latest advances and the developments of the ETS. Of course, the inclusion of offsets, that's something that we all look forward. And which opportunities do you think are there for early action? Head over to you.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. Can you hear me? Okay, good. Thank you very much for this invitation. I'm very glad to be here. Sorry for the cam because my computer doesn't hit. But I'm Cyril Islas. I'm Chief of Department for Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources in Mexico. So I'm part of the ETS team in charge of implementing the pilot program in Mexico. The next slide, please. Thank you. I want to start to mention the climate action framework to implement the emissions trading system in Mexico because it strengthens its objectives and contribute to achieve the NDC's targets. The last December, Mexico published the NDC update, which considers the ETS as a part of its new level of ambition that allows us to move forward in implementing this kind of policy instruments as economy instruments. The update of NDC considers some elements that will make possible to achieve the adaptation and mitigation objectives. As a part of this update, to mention something, it considers a better knowledge in the climate science and a better synergies between adaptation and mitigation components. And one new element is that the NDC is based on human rights and equality perspectives as an important subject to build a climate policy with impacts in the national territory that is the focus of this administration. On this aspect, Mexico has a policy framework aligned to National Development Plan, national objectives, and sectoral programs. So, however, our regulation to develop activities regarding non-carbon pricing instrument is the general law on climate change that establish government goals. At this point, the ETS implementation started in 2020, so it considers two important phases, the pilot phase and transitional phase with the objectives to move forward to operational phase in 2023. The next slide, please. So regarding on, about the legal framework of the ETS, the climate change law was amended according to the goals and content of the Paris Agreement in July 2018. This reform established to Semarnat is the entity to design and implement an ETS. The law establishes a pilot phase in 36 months without economic impacts, and the law says that we need to develop the regulations and the instruments for this pilot. In 2019, the regulation for the pilot phase was published on October 1st, that is known as a preliminary basis for the pilot program. This regulation considers the compliance periods, the scope, the participants, the method of allocation, and other topics that are very important to start the implementation. A key consideration is that energy and industry sector are regulated by this economic instrument. So other consideration is that the allowances allocation is free for regulated sectors. This kind of allocation considers historical emission that is based on grandfathering method. And other consideration is that the verified emissions according to the process and procedures in the National Emission Registry. That is the MRB of the ETS. Next slide, please. Thank you. A key milestone of the ETS is the development of the registry as a platform that allows us to put in practice this instrument. This is the system that we will allow the allocation of the emission right by participant. This system has three main tools as authorization, transaction, and verified emission. It also has two monitoring tools, account statements and compliance, that it allows the tracking in the market by participants. It's important to mention that each participant has users in the system with different activities. For example, one user is a broker who can do transactions and report verified emissions. The other user is who authorizing those transactions or that transaction and the information regarding on verified emissions. Currently, we are working the process to set up the information of the participants in the registry. We think that this is a big steps are essential to start the pilot. So we are considering a specific workshop related to the registry, another kind of workshop according to business as a business decision into the company or by the participants. The next slide, please. Thank you. The pilot program has the flexibility compliance mechanisms that recognize mitigation projects that they will be developed by protocols. In other way, the mechanism recognizes the mitigation projects that have reservoir reductions credit before the program started. It's important to mention that the reductions should be real, quantifiable, permanent, and verifiable. And also, the regulation considers that the complies their obligation by offsets. They could use offsets to comply only the 10% of their obligations. The regulation establishes that the participants could use offsets to comply only and 10%, as I mentioned, or their obligations in two ways: from projects that was developed in Mexico before the pilot program, and they got certifications by international bodies. In other way, we are developing protocols for Mexican projects in livestock and agriculture sectors and others. At this moment, only we are considering Mexican projects, but I'm sure that in the future it's possible to exchange in other markets. I hope that at the next year we get some draft of protocols. I would like to mention that we are working on design this scheme, these protocols, and we have been developing the protocols for priority mitigation activities in Mexico. The next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, to finish my presentation, this slide we can look the next key steps. We have been working many activities, for example, subjects regarding on legal nature of emission rights, promote projects and comprehensive and activities in unregulated sectors that are regarding on offsets and the flexibility mechanisms. And I think that we need to review MRB process and activities regarding on capacity buildings. To find, I think that we will need to put on the table the learned lessons in the pilot phase, and we will need to develop the new regulation to the operational phase. It will consider, I think that it will consider the main basis as economic impacts or other kinds of regulated emissions. I don't know, I think that we will hope to put in practice our knowledge that we will learn during this pilot phase. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suriel. Thank you very much. Very useful information for all of us. Let's move forward now with our next panelist. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Ivan Hernandez. Ivan works for the Partnership for Market Readiness, and we'll touch now upon what's just been discussed. The PMR has supported a number of offset protocols, 3 offset protocols, and it would be very useful to get to know them. And of course, what's the status of verification program rules? I give the floor to you, Ivan.
Thank you very much, Eduardo, and for the kind introduction. I would like to also thank the Reserve for the kind invitation to participate in this workshop. As it was mentioned, I will perform my presentation talking about the development of the preliminary protocols that the PMR have provide support, and also general references about the verification program rules that we have also provide support as part of the offset program in Mexico ETS. Next, please. Next, as a background, and also as Suriel just explained, the preliminary bases include the flexibility mechanisms. There are 2 components in this flexible mechanisms: the early actions, as it was explained in the previous presentation, and the compliance offset scheme. I don't want to spend many time here because Suriel already explained this part, but this is the background of what I will show in this presentation. Next, please. The PMR have provide a support to enhance the Mexico effort to achieve the comprehensive MRB system for the pilot phase of the emission trading system. We have provide technical support and capacity buildings specifically for these flexibility mechanisms as part of the system. Next, please. The scope of the work developed regarding the development of the draft protocols include the identification and prioritization of mitigation activities and projects within each of the sectors included in this consultancy. The support also included a technical advice for the development of a demonstrative offset protocol versions that include the following sectors: forest, livestock, agriculture, and road transport. Also, during the consultancy, all the process for developing this demonstrative version of the protocol was documented to help the authority to define a process and the considerations for the development of further protocols. Next, please. And next one, please. The specific scope of the work included for the compliance offset scheme also include the recommendations and guidance for the project life cycle for the development of this new offset projects that will be eligible as part of the compliance scheme. It includes as well procedures and approval processes for new and revised offset protocols as the ones that were developed, and potentially the recognitions of other protocols that have been developed for other schemes, and the verification guidance and criteria for the offset protocols. Next, please. It is important in the light of this support that the PMR has provided to the Mexican authority to acknowledge the relevance of the carbon offset projects. These specific mechanisms have been demonstrated of being cost effective for achieving mitigation. So it makes sense to really consider this as a clue component of the emission trading system in Mexico. The offset projects have demonstrated to address the mitigation potential, especially for those sectors that now are not yet included in the system or in the compliance scheme. Also, historically, this kind of projects have delivered benefits to the communities and also to a broad range of stakeholders through its development. It unlocks the level of private investment. It also brings room for innovation by the development of different technologies for new projects. It can be also part of the national climate strategies as a complement of the NDCs, for example, and also for corporates, but also for countries. It is a component that can help towards the zero strategies, the net to zero strategies. Next, please. Specifically about the demonstrative offset protocols that were developed through the support of the PMR. As I mentioned, we work in 4 sectors: forestry, livestock, agriculture, and road transport, specifically under these specific activities that you see in the screen. For forest, the protocol includes activities for afforestation, reforestation, and improved forest management. For livestock, the protocol is focused on the animal waste management through biodigesters, and the agricultural protocol is about the reduction of agricultural biomass burning, and the road transport protocol is about the introduction of 2-wheel transportation technologies, including introduction of e-bikes. As I mentioned, the scope of the work includes an assessment to identify the priorities and also other considerations to identify the most suitable activities to take for the development of the demonstrative version of the protocols. Also, I am very pleased to show the consortium that work in each of the protocols for the developments. It was very good to have very strong technical teams with the consortium that work on the development of each sectors. I am also very pleased to see the active role that the reserve took in the development of this protocol. Next, please. The main considerations that we took into account for the development of these protocols include a spirit of simplification and a consolidation of technical approaches. What we intend to do is taking the experience and the lessons learned from other schemes and try to avoid the bottlenecks and the mistakes done in the past by the other mechanisms in order to propose a fresh and speed up cycle for the certification of this kind of projects, starting with the structure of the protocols. So this is something that we try to emphasize during the development of all the work for these protocols, and the consortiums working on the protocols understood very well this spirit, and the technical work is focused on this, the simplification by the incorporation of a standardized analysis for eligibility or also for the additionality demonstration. This intends to reduce the burden by developing this project and also lowering the transaction cost, because if we make more efficient this process by simplifying the approaches, that will benefit later the development of this project. This also increase the market certainty and simplify at the end the scrutiny by the administrator of the program and also by the verification bodies. Next, please. We try to introduce different standardized quantification approaches by incorporating specific default factors that will allow the participation of the communities and local technicians, and not necessarily always hiring a very international and high specialized consultant, but it is possible that someone understands what is this about and by their own develop the protocol, the projects, understanding the basic of the protocols. Next, please. We also include some approaches. For instance, for the forest protocol, the approach of aggregation to allow the inclusion of small projects to take advantage of the economies of the scales. Next, please. As I said, we try to introduce the national default values to reduce the cost in the monitoring without compromising the integrity of the project. Next, please. And also we merge everything in a single document, which is very important to mention in comparison with other standards that propose to use many documents. Everything is found in a single document. I think we are on time, and I will speed up my presentation. Next, please. For the verification program, we try to settle the very basic definitions and concepts as the third-party audits, the validation and verification scope, the materiality, the level of assurance, and accreditation principles. Next, please. We also took the experiences from other accreditation schemes to, as I said, avoid bottlenecks. And this work extends some recommendations about the different alternatives, for example, recognitions of other accreditation schemes, but also the development of our own accreditation schemes, the definition of competences and materiality and confidentiality. Next, please. I think this is the last one. And we define the validation and certification cycle. This is, in general, the overview of the work provided by the PMR for the development of the protocols and the verification guidance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Van. Thank you very much. Needless to say, simplification and standardized eligibility and additionality are crucial for the success of more emission reductions and to achieve more emission reductions. Thank you very much for your intervention. We'll move forward now, and it is impossible to think about offsets in Mexico without thinking about forestry. Mexico is home to the second largest rainforest in the Americas. And to comment on that and the possibility of forestry offsets, we have the pleasure of having Mariana Martinez from CONAFOR. Mariana, I give the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Eduardo, and thank you very much for the invitation from the Climate Action Reserve. It's a pleasure to be here sharing with such good colleagues in this work. I'm going to share briefly about some of the actions that from CONAFOR we are starting to implement in order to be ready for the full implementation of the ETS system in 2023. So could you please go to the next slide? Thank you. For the next one as well. Thank you. Well, yes, to start, I will like to briefly share about the Sustainable Forest Incentive Program, that is the program in the forestry sector in Mexico. It is organized basically in 5 components, which includes incentives to support different activities in the areas of the community forest management, the forest plantation, and the establishment of agroforestry system. Also, we support the restoration activities with focus on strategic regions that are important with different criteria that the technical areas focus in order to have the best results. It also includes the support for the environmental service scheme, and of course, all the activities related to the forest. So what I'm talking about this is because this is the first year. Could you please go to the next slide? Thank you. Basically, this is the first year that CONAFOR is supporting through this forest management and the value chain some activities to encourage the preparation and establishment to achieve emissions reductions and increase the permanence of carbon stocks. So basically, the incentive is aimed to producers that are developed or consolidated according to scale and typology that in CONAFOR we have producer divided into different stages of their development for the community forest management. And depending on the scale that they are, they might be able to join these kind of incentives. So basically, this component, the forestry carbon project, is aimed for projects that might be supported from the initial phase or maybe projects that are currently in process, as long as they include the subsequent stages and are contemplated until the insurance of the certificates of their initial verification. So the important thing is that we make sure that we can support those projects who contemplate the full activities until they get the issue of these compensations. One thing that is important to say is that the forest be developed under a recognized and reliable methodology, and such as the American Carbon Registry, the one that is issued by the Reserve, perhaps those related to the Vera, or even the gold standard. So we have at the moment all these international, well-recognizable and reliable methodologies to be, let's say, like the first phase in order for community to starting to get ready and get accustomed to the kind of requirements that these methodologies have. To include at least 2,000 minimum hectares of surface in order to apply for this incentive. And well, we have a series of different activities that are supported, and the amount that they can request, it varies that they are and the activity that they might want to support. It goes from having support for the feasibility analysis, for the carbon inventory, or even for the formalization and the agreement with this kind of standards. Could you go next first? The next slide, please. So I'm not intending to go through this, but it's basically all the different supporting concepts and catalog of the activities that an ejido or a community could apply for this incentive. And depending on the surface that they want to apply, they could be asking up to the amount of around $20,000. Next, please. So, aligned with what my colleagues were talking before, in Mexico, we are having important preparation activities towards the building of the first draft of the Mexico Forest Protocol for the environmental trading scheme. And as Suriel and Ivan said before, sectors that are not covered are agricultural, livestock, and waste management at the sector. Next, please. One, to make sure to get the message for all the installations that are thinking on acquiring an offset coming from the forestry sector is the advantage that they bring, perhaps in comparison for those projects that could emit the emissions before than the forestry sector. I think the important from this kind of offsetting is the important contributions that they have promoting the economic, the social, environmental well-being of the communities, forests in Mexico. So as they were mentioning before, we've been very happy and glad with the support from the Partnership for Market Readiness, which is supported by the World, to develop this protocol for the sector, which was designed from the World Resources Institute in Mexico, the Climate Action Reserve, and the Mexico CO2 Platform, which are a very well-recognized organizations for this matter. It is important to say that we had a very short time period to start designing this intensive but very productive time. So we had more or less 5 months to have this first draft set it with all these lists that Ivan was sharing previously before. Next, please. So what we had during this very intensive period of time where CONAFOR and working hand in hand with the consulting group is basically identify the first activities that are mainly on improved forest management activities related to afforestation and reforestation. Of course, the goal is to ensure that the projects removals are cost and transparently, precisely, and conservatively quantified. The draft of this protocol, it includes the environmental safeguard guarantees, of course, because it is adapted to the Mexican. We need to make sure that we have in account all the things related to land tenure and all the environmental safeguards that can be detonated from different activities. Well, the current status of this protocol, the demonstrative protocol, is viewed from the National Institute of Ecology and Climate Change, the proper Ministry of Environment, CONAFOR, and the National Commission of Natural Protected Areas. These are the institutions that we are going to make sure to ensure and to build those incentives for the communities and ejidos to participate once all these lines are ready. And could you go next, please, for the next slide? Thank you. So finally, to close this small participation, I just want to mention about the co-benefits that this forestry protocol offers. In Mexico, there is a high overlap between the forest areas, the location of native peoples, and areas of high marginalization and poverty. It is estimated that over 15,000 ejidos and communities own 60.4 million hectares with forest vegetation, which represents a huge opportunity for them to enhance their economic and the life that they have. It is also important to mention that some núcleos agrarios have also forest management activities in the territories. So there was an enormous potential for these organizations to participate into the offering of the offsetting for the ETS system. The next one, which is the last one. And last but not least, from CONAFOR, we are totally sure that carbon offset projects in the forestry sector will help to protect, to conserve, and restore the forests that are owned by ejidos and communities. This type of projects could support the comprehensive strategies toward the conservation and use of biodiversity under sustainable development approach, therefore contributing for the goals that we have set aligned with the 2030 agenda and, of course, the NDC. That is what we need to ensure that we have a robust protocol in 2023 ready. And, well, we'll keep continue working in order to get ready our communities and or ejidos in order to participate in the ETS scheme. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll be here if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mariana. Wonderful presentation. Co-benefits are extremely important component for Mexico, and of course they make a statement for more offsets and more emission reductions. We'll move forward now with Ana Gargollo for an in-depth insights and analysis on the compliance protocol designed for inclusion of the forest sector. So Ana, please move forward.
Thank you, Eduardo. Amy, are you able to play the video beforehand? Great. So we're going to show you just a short video of a project that USAID, ProNatura, and WRI Mexico are working on, so that you can get a bit of context, and then I'll dive into my presentation. Not sure if you're able to hear that, so I'll unmute so you can hear it. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Amy. Well, I think the volume was a little low, but hopefully you could see the subtitles for the explanation. So as I mentioned, USAID, Pronatura, and WRI in Mexico developed the Comunitario project, which is the largest forest carbon capture project in Mexico so far. Next slide, please. It's a 5-year project, and our targets are to increase income for communities through the sale of forestry carbon credits, hoping to total more than $4 million for communities, to generate capacities with local organizations, forest owners, and local government. Our goal is to conserve 200,000 hectares of forest, which will capture approximately 3 million tons of CO2 and generate at least 900,000 forestry carbon credits. Next, please. Well, we have 2 components. The first component is field activities to generate the carbon credits, and the second component is public policy strengthening. And I will be talking more about this one, and actually on Tuesday, we have another presentation to talk about the whole project. So for this public policy component, we're focusing on giving recommendations to the government so they can strengthen the Mexican emissions trading system so that we can work also for the inclusion of forestry carbon credits in the market. And we're developing some studies to accompany this. And also one of the activities is obviously presenting this information to the government and especially those involved in the Mexican emission trading system. So we're honored to be presenting here today alongside CONAFOR and Semarnat as well. Next, please. So I'm going to be presenting 3 studies. The first one is social environmental characterization of the sites that our project was in, with the objective of valuing especially like all these ecosystems and the social benefits that come with this. So we analyzed different characteristics, including, for example, climate or proximity to roads or even deforestation. Next, please. And our main results was that the project is being implemented in a great variety of climate and ecological conditions, which is great because we want this project to be replicated by different project developers. So if we have a great diversity of sites, then many project developers from a diverse background will be able to replicate it. Another result was that the greatest extension of forest has important ecosystem services, which in turn have economic value. So a conclusion from this is that all projects that promote forestry conservation have a high economic value, such as forest carbon capture projects. And also that the areas that are in close proximity to natural protected areas have a great potential for synergies, which means these kinds of projects have a lot of potential for synergies with the government. Our conclusion is that our project is focalized correctly in areas with high value, and that this information will be valuable especially for the buyers, which brings me to the next study. Next, please. Which is a study to measure the social and environmental co-benefits of these kinds of projects. The objective was to offer guidance on how best to integrate these co-benefits into forestry carbon projects, and also to measure the willingness to pay of buyers. So we have both sides of the coin, the benefits of the project developer, but also how much is the buyer willing to pay for that, right? Because we identified that forestry carbon projects have the potential to finance ejidos and communities, but the price usually only considers the carbon and not all the co-benefits that come with it. So based on the choice methodology, we invited the 70 companies that Eduardo mentioned are part of the regulated Mexican ETS. Around 25 participated. Next, please. This is a little bit of how the methodology looked. So we took into account ecosystem services, social lag, ecological integrity, and price. And these companies were able to decide what was the best option for them and how much they would pay for this, which is really interesting. Next, please. We had a lot of interesting takeaways from this, but the main results were that the buyers were willing to pay $7 to $9 additional US for projects developed in the jungle or temperate forest, $5 additional dollars for project developed in intact ecological areas, so like really pristine areas, and then $2 for those developed in marginalized or impoverished areas. So we saw that maybe the social impact wasn't as important as the ecosystem itself, but I think it's really important to point out that these are additional dollars. So this is over a baseline price of carbon. This is what buyers would be willing to pay above that. Next, please. And then the last study is we developed a study to measure the cost for achieving a level of governance to implement a forestry carbon capture project, because we realized that as much as we wanted to work with many communities and ejidos, they weren't ready. So we wanted to define what cost the community or ejido would have to incur in to get to this baseline level of governance. And then with this information, be able to guide policy and projects associated with promoting community governance so that we can strengthen it together. We surveyed 28 organizations that work directly with forestry communities or ejidos, and to measure a bit of this. Next, please. This is what we defined was like the baseline level of governance. I'll go into it at another time. Next, please. And well, the main result is that a community needs to invest 88 days or approximately $361,000 pesos to implement these processes to achieve that level of governance. And at this point, we would like to deliver this information officially to CONAFOR and to Semarnat, so that they can take this to maybe generate a prior program so that they can prepare communities and ejidos to enter into the Mexican emissions trading system. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ana. Thank you very much. One big takeaway from your presentation: 3 million tons of CO2 is a very large number, but still, we need more. We need more emission reductions. Now, moving forward with our panel, we have, of course, one of our main speakers, José Ramón Ardavin. Over 60 energy and large industry entities are covered by the ETS, by the Mexican ETS. They are the ones to provide their perspective on. We have, of course, José Ramón, an environmental leader in the private sector. José Ramón, I give the floor to you. I think you're muted.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. Thank you, all of you. I'm going to go very straightforward on my 2 slides. The main idea, as we understand it, is that the ETS pilot phase is a learn by doing experience. So the point is to share valuable experience among participants and with Semarnat, which is the environmental authorities. If you could go to the first slide, please. Well, as an important thing, Mexico's ETS it was launched a pilot phase and ETSs. That's something important. We took an example from them. Pilot is planned to last for 2 years, as was mentioned, with a transition phase in 2023 prior to the operational phase. Facilities regulated, as you mentioned, is those emitting 100,000 tons of CO2. Main industries participating are oil and gas, electricity, steel, cement, chemical, and pulp and paper. And the design includes an advisory committee, COCOSE by its acronym in Spanish, to provide non-violent to the environmental authority on best practices and specialized knowledge for the benefit of the ETS performance. So basically, this is something I want to highlight, because on this advisory committee, that is by government representatives as well as committed entities as well as NGOs. We are looking to provide good knowledge to the authority so that the ETS is operates properly in this pilot phase. Next, please. Then I'll go to the expectations from our perspective. Well, the first is to clarity, and transparency of rules, mainly on these specific issues, which is right allocation, offsets, credits acceptance, offset protocols, which is also very important. Allocation for capacity expansion and new participants, and free allocation during the pilot phase as established on the ETS rules or basis. So that is the main issues we think should need to be clear. The other point is to benefit by entities participating in other markets. As some of the companies participate in California or in the European market. So that gives them experience that we think is valuable to be shared among participants and with the authority. The other point is we expect openness to proposals expressed in the advisory committee, because there are many technical issues that need to be examined or need to be revised, or we need to go deeper into the knowledge. So we expect that the committee brings good advice. And the last is capacity building for the proper operation of the ETS, basically in two issues, which is the systems and infrastructure, decision makers and their back office, as well as verification entities to ensure reliability of the emissions report provided by the regulated entities. We think all this is capacity building. The pilot phase is designed for this capacity building and to learn by doing, as I mentioned. So, we are really excited in this pilot phase we have just started, and we are with our best of our attitudes and our capacities to put on the table our experience and allow for the best performance of the ETS prior to the operational phase. So, thank you very much for listening, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that could arise from the public or from our colleagues. Thank you.
Wonderful, Jose Ramon. One big takeaway: we can learn from what happened in California and in Europe. Thank you very much for that very, very important lesson. Now we move forward with questions. So I think that Amy must have some.
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Eduardo, and thank you to all of our panelists. That was really fantastic. Just really a super panel. It seems like some of our questions have already been answered, but perhaps I'll just start with some of them that haven't. Paula Del Rio has asked if or when we're planning to hold the Mexican Carbon Forum. I think that'd be probably for Ana or Terry. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's going to be in June. Tere, correct me if I'm wrong. It's June 26th and June 27th. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, and it's going to be virtual too, and it's 2 hours and a half. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you?
Yeah, we can.
Yes.
And it's 2 hours and a half Thursday. And we will send you, as soon as we have the link, all the information.
Great, thank you both. Perhaps for Suriel, or I think Suriel had to jump off, my apologies. Perhaps for Mariana. When can we expect the finalization of the draft protocols? It says not only for forestry, but also for the livestock, agriculture, and transport sectors. Perhaps Mariana, you can talk to the forestry one.
Thank you, Amy. Well, I think this will be still a process that we'll conduct through the entire year. So I think towards the end of the year, we might have a more robust offset protocol. But I don't know, because it is also depending on the lines that the Ministry of Environment will share. So yeah, we're still working on that. I don't know if Suriel would like to comment on that.
I think Suriel had to jump off, but I don't know if Ivan, if you have anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, well, it is important to highlight that Semarnat is leading the process to finalize the developments. The scope of work, as I explained, by the PMR includes the technical development, but it is important to have in mind that before seeing these protocols being launched, there are other elements that should be settled. For instance, the registry for hosting the projects, the full set of rules for the verification and for the certification of the projects, the templates, and this kind of elements that for sure takes a lot of time for being developed, and the legal framework to ensure everything is appropriate as this documents of being policy instruments. So I think having this in mind, the development that we got with this demonstrative draft version is really good, but there are other elements that are ongoing and led by Semarnat, and hopefully we will have soon more updates in this regard.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. I think that is the question of the hour, right? So thank you so much. I know we weren't able to get to all your questions. We will save them and try to follow up with you each. But I did want to remind you, this is a two-part session. So we have another session on Tuesday, April 27th from 8 to 9 a.m. I hope you're all able to join us then as well. And thank you again to all our panelists and to Eduardo for moderating. It was really fantastic. Have a great rest of the NACW. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your help, and thanks for the reserve for your awfully good job on supporting Mexico.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.